are the Org. Our mission is to assimilate Star Trek The Next Generation, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and beer. Lots of beer.
You're listening to a Geek Planet Online community podcast. For more free entertainment, including podcasts and videos, visit us at geekplanetonline.com.
Hello, friends!
Hello!
Welcome to bOrgCast 10.6. Hope all is well with you. We have a little bit of...
Last time on Star Trek The Next Generation.
In our discussion on how the snow in the holodeck worked,
Yes.
was brought into being and could somehow travel outside the holodeck, at Hippie Wizard on Twitter reminded me that holodecks also use force fields to enable people to sit on things. So it's not just replicated matter and holographic images, but there's also force fields being used as well. So the travelling on snow could be produced by using that technology. So
then when the force field is no longer in use, it wouldn't work anymore?
yes, you'd go straight to the floor.
Yeah. So the force field, again, exists within the holodeck. So
Yes,
the
yes.
snow
It doesn't expect the snow that comes. That had to be replicated snow. It's the only way that would work.
Yeah. But if you've got, presumably though, thinking about the holographic bullets, a force field is still a field. So if a force field is fired at you in concentrated form, because the safeties are off, it could damage you, couldn't it?
Could do. Or they could be replicated bullets, which is an easier answer. But anyway.
Yeah. But whichever kind of makes some sense.
Cool. So thank you for that.
Thank you!
And tonight's episode, or the first one, is The Darkness and the Light.
A ghost from Kira's past is hunting down her closest friends,
What are we dealing with here? Professional assassin?
executing his victims one
That's two.
by one.
I should be down there trying to protect them.
And now he's closing in
You murdered 5 people.
on his final target.
Only the guilty have died.
On the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
You start with a Vedek leading a retreat in a monastery, and then a candle shoots him.
Yeah.
Or seems to.
Yeah, the camera work is really, throughout the story, is really good. And in this one, the way the camera looks down on the monks sat round in a circle is really cool. And then when he gets shot, he just flies across the screen. It's fantastic. Properly dead.
Yep. And then you have a scene with Kira being told she needs to take some herbs, but she doesn't like them because they taste like something that came out of Quark's ear.
Yeah. Ooh, waxy.
Ew. And then it turns out that there was a hunter probe in the candle, and the Vedek, Latham, was in Kira's resistance cell. And she gets a message that says, "That's one," in a decidedly electronic voice.
Yes, very freaky.
And the message comes through at the exact same time that Vedek Latham was killed. And then you're on the station, and it's just a side note, but we noted one of the melted mice.
Yes. Oh gosh, what are they called?
I don't know, I've always thought of them as melted mice. Jagram Shrek was one of them.
Yes.
But I don't remember what the race is, just that they're melted mice.
Uridian? I think they're Uridians, but I'm going to have to Google that.
Oh, you go Google that.
But there's no point Googling melted mouse, is there?
Not
But
really.
anyway.
No. And then Kira has has a call coming. They're upping security and everything, and Kira has a call coming, and they're all in ops, and they're all like trying to trace it and whatever, and it's like, oh, we don't know where this call's coming from, and they think it's a threat. And it's a friend of Kira's.
Yeah, I was right.
Is Uridian?
He's a Uridian.
And initially it's like, who is this person, whatever, how's it going to work? And she's like, no, it's okay. It's a friend, it's fine, I'll take it. And then she says she's alone when she just goes up a level.
Yeah. She literally walks a few paces away and says that she's alone. Well, clearly everybody can hear the conversation.
She should have gone into
the captain's office. That would have been far more sense. And by the way, the captain is still wearing the wrong shirt in this, although throughout the episode it alternates. The way you can tell is where the comm badge is. But sometimes, like in this scene, he's wearing a shirt that doesn't fit him properly, so the comm badge is in the grey instead of in the black. There are other scenes where the ones that aren't in ops, where it's in the black. It sort of alternates throughout. It's very confusing.
Well, it's for somebody like you who pays attention to that sort of thing rather than things like plot and character. I wouldn't have noticed any of those things had you not pointed them out.
Yes, there you go. See, it's an education being around me.
Or something. Anyway, she says, no, it's a friend, and she's going to send Dax and Worf to get her. And then you're in the runabout, and there's an amusing scene with Dax and Worf where she's baited someone at Tongo, got them to agree to a no limits game, and then lost and then some because he was a 3-time champion and she didn't know. And Worf's like, you could have asked. And then she's got into debt, and she sort of looks at him and he's like, no. And then she's like, well, I'll borrow the money of Quark then. And he quotes the rules of acquisition at her. And then she's like, you know the rules of acquisition? And he's like, I am a graduate of Starfleet Academy. I know many things.
Yes. As per usual, Worf shines when he's in the background.
Yeah.
When it's an episode centred around Worf, quite often he's not so impressive. But if he's just got a couple of scenes in an episode, he's brilliant.
But then the person that they are trying to rescue really actually quite dramatically fries in the transporter. I mean, for a show that went out mostly at tea time, it's really properly dead, quite gruesome.
You see the charred corpse.
You do, with the skull and a rib sticking out and everything.
It's similar to what they did in Star Trek The Motion Picture. In the extended cut, of course, not in the original one, where the extended cut where stuff actually happens, where there's a Vulcan who's going to be the science officer and a woman that they beam up, but because the transporters aren't ready yet, it all goes horribly wrong and they get all warped, and you kind of glimpse something happening. But this is a lot more in your face.
It's quite graphic for that. I mean, it's not,
This is straight up, Owen and Lars being toasted in Tatooine, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it turns out that there was a tiny remat device which sensors should have picked up but didn't, so this person knows their protocols. And they're like, she wasn't a member of Shakaar Resistance Cell. Why was she being picked on? And the answer is because she was... Informer, say that I'm a snowman, I go blam. I keep on down. Take the man that says that I'm a snowman, stand somewhere down the lane. I keep on down. No.
Ooh, painful. Really painful.
Well, you can just put the track over that, you see.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, the actual track's painful. I mean, yes, admittedly your rendition was as well, but...
That's because I've had beer.
Yeah, but, I mean, it's not like it was great to start with, so it was never going to come out wonderfully. Blimey, Charlie.
But she was an informer.
Yeah, very good. I like the fact that Kira takes her earring, which we've seen before. She's taken earrings off dead Bajoras.
When they met Zial for the first time.
Yeah, she collects the ones off and said that she'll return them to the families, so, yeah. That's a thing.
Yes.
I like it when they're consistent with their things.
Yes. And then she's with Odo, and then someone hacks the security system, so it can't be that secure, really.
Well, he's obviously good, isn't he? And
you get that's 3. And then she's in her quarters, and there've been security checks before, and a guard's gone in, and she goes through to like her own room, which they haven't checked, which seems a bit daft, but anyway. And then she hears a thump. So she grabs a phaser out the drawer. Why wasn't she wearing one?
They don't around the station generally, unless they're security personnel, to be fair.
But yeah, she grabs a phaser, and she opens the door, and it's all dark, and you think, what's happening now? And it's Pharrell and Lupazar!
Yeah, they're back from Shakaar, was it they were in originally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were good, unlike him.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're chatting and whatever, and then O'Brien walks into his own quarters and nearly gets shot.
Yeah, and also, I never know which one's which, the bloke one.
I think the bloke is Pharrell.
Uh-huh. Well, he's got a box, which he's sort of because he's only got the one arm, which he's holding under his arm. And Kira goes, what's in the box? Which is a horrible Seven moment, which, considering the sort of atmosphere in the episode of creepiness, actually is a bit unfortunate.
And it's bay leaves, macro herbs.
Yes, it turns out to be herbs in the end and not somebody's severed head or whatever it was in 7.
Yeah, so then you're with Nog, and he identifies that the message is composite.
Because he's got the lobes for it.
Yeah, I like that Dax says, I've learned to never argue with the lobes. And then later on, Kira questions something and then just holds her hands up and goes, no, that's fine. And he's like, it's a composite message. So they isolate one word, use it, and then he's like, it's not Cardassian.
It's female.
It's Bajor, and I know that voice. And then she goes, it's mine. And that's one of the things that I'd remembered about this episode, is that it was her voice. Yeah, while she's there, they then suddenly, alarms go off. There's been an explosion in the habitat ring, and she just goes down there and she fucking kicks ass. She's a heavily pregnant woman.
Yeah, nobody stands in her way, do they?
But then, kind of understandably, after fighting loads of people, she then collapses.
Yeah. Now, I mean, killing off Pharrell and Lupazar was a kind of a gutsy move, because we have seen them before, and they're quite likeable, aren't they?
They are. I really like them.
And the writers were sort of toing and froing whether they'd go through with it or not, because they kind of wanted to bring them back, but they ultimately decided it was important that it wasn't just nobodies we'd never heard of before that had been killed off, but somebody that we knew about already, and therefore, if we'd feel something about. So I think it's the right decision.
I agree, it's sad, but I think in terms of the writing, it's right. And yeah, as Kira comes round, she's told they're dead, and she sort of remembers them and tells the story of her joining the resistance and
how she got her earring. Yeah,
and I like this because it's not overplayed. So like you've got a couple of tears, and she looks genuinely sad.
She's not completely sobbing her eyes out because she's a tough person actually, and. Yeah, no, it's really well acted and really, really well lit as well. Again,
and well shot as well.
Yes, the whole composition of it all. There's a darkness in the background. I mean, the tightness is between the darkness and the light.
Who directed this?
I think this was Mike Vigia.
While you're looking that up, I'll carry on. Odo comes in and gives her an update. He's got these 25 suspects. And she's like, can I have the list? And he's like, no, I haven't narrowed it down yet. And then she's like, you think I'm just going to go after them? And he's like, yeah. And then she says, keep me informed. And he says, absolutely. It's one of the things I like about Odo is that where other people might try and keep things from her, he understands her need to know. And he's not trying to shield her from information other than he's got this list and he doesn't want her to have it. But he is keeping her informed, and he's not trying to go, oh, no, you can't cope with this right now, let me deal with it. Mm-hmm. Which I like. Unfortunately, having discovered that he has names, she sort of gets up from her chair, does an emergency site-to-site transport, gets the names, wipes them in the progress, and then gets onto a runabout. And Odo comes in and he notices his chair has moved.
Yeah, it's very Odo.
Very Odo. And automatically, therefore, then goes, where's Kira? So then you've got Cisco is saying to Worf, and you've got Odo there as well.
Prepare the Defiant. I want to leave in 10 minutes, see if we can pick up our ion trail.
It will be difficult. Our sensor logs show Major Kira master engine emissions with the Polaron field. The runabout's part of...
I know what the difficulties are. You have your orders dismissed.
Aye, sir.
I love that. It's just like, cut the crap and get on with it. It's one of the things I like about Cisco.
Yeah, and it was Mike Vigia, by the way, who they brought in. I mean, he worked on Babylon 5.
Uh-huh.
He'd done some Next Gen, but hadn't worked on the series for a while. He's going to become kind of a regular director, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of his episodes, because, as I say, he's got a really good eye for a shot.
Yeah, definitely. So then you get a voiceover by Kira, eliminated 3 suspects. You got it down to the 4th Silurian Prim, and you meet him, and you just know he's creepy, because it's all dark and he's saying poetry.
And the station thing he's on next to the
it's broken,
the DMZ,
isn't it?
It's a really, really good. I think it's a model they've built, and then they composite Kira's image into it, and also his image into it. You can see him through the window.
Yeah,
it's really well done. Excellent stuff. And the internal sets, as you say, really well lit, but also this is full of clutter and well framed shots again with her on the seat and all in a pool of lights,
and him in the darkness.
Yeah. So this is Silurian Prim, who's played by Randy Oglesby. It was the Mirror twins, both of them, in season 1's Vortex. Remember them? One of them gets killed, and it's that guy who's got like a bit of a changeling round his neck. It's a very one of the first few episodes of season 1.
No, I remember that. I remember that now you mentioned it.
Vortex, I think that one was called.
Okay.
He was also in one of Reva's chorus in As Loud as a Whisper, back in season 2 of Next Generation. And he'll return as Degra, the Zindi that Archer wins over in Enterprise, and he's really good in that. But he's he's part of the good season of Enterprise.
Yeah.
He's also in Angel, The West Wing, Pearl Harbor, Columbo, X-Files, L.A. La Law, to name but a few.
Cool. You see that he's got half his face melted, and he blames Kira for his injury. He says he was innocent because he was only a servant. This despite the fact he was living in occupied territory. So he's still an occupier, and therefore he's still guilty, which is what she points out to him. Yeah.
Although his point is that she was indiscriminate in the way that they struck. In the way that he isn't being, he's been very precise in making sure as far as he's concerned, the innocent aren't affected. So
true, but it takes a combination of technology, skill, and finances to be discriminate.
Yep, that's true as well. I mean, it's just one of those wonderful stories where actually they're both right. I mean,
yes and no. She's more right than him.
Arguably, but It's not like it was Ron Moore who wrote the screenplay, and it's actually his favourite work on the series. And he said he was very happy with the way that, normally in the series, particularly with a female character, that they'd apologise, give way a bit, or
And she doesn't.
It's like
she's
straight down the line. We did what we
occupier.
had to do. You shouldn't have been there.
Yeah,
so therefore
you're
guilty.
occupying our land, all of you. Yeah, absolutely.
But you're also supposed to feel some sympathy for him as well, so that it's like nobody's completely in the right or in the wrong.
I feel very little sympathy for him because he's still an occupier. He might have only been a servant. He's still an occupier. He still should not have been on Bajor. Had it been closest equivalent to the IRA taking their campaign to the mainland, i.e. had they been bombing on Cardassia and he had been a servant, I would have a lot more sympathy for him.
Interesting distinction.
As it is, I have very little. However, when he later goes on to talk about the fact that they blew up the whole complex, again, they would not have had the finances or the technology to be precise. So it was blow up the whole complex and therefore save an awful lot of Bajoran lives while taking out some innocent Cardassians, or do nothing. There was no in-between because they didn't have the technology or the finances at their disposal. But in the process of doing that, although it's not said explicitly, the implication is Cardassian children were killed because he had his family there.
Yeah.
Well, he's a stupid fucker for bringing his family there. He's responsible for that, not her. But in terms of Cyrilla and Prim being upset at her and saying you have killed innocents, that I would agree with.
Yeah.
Because the children didn't choose to be there because they were not of an age when the choice was theirs.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't blame Kira for it because, as I said, the Bajorans themselves had no choice because they didn't have the technology to discriminate the way Cyrilla and Prim does. But that's the one area where I do feel he has a point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as well, when you look at that scene, I think you see some of that in her eyes. That whereas up until that point she's defiant, there is no regret there. When he talks about that that whole family being there, I do think you see in Nana Visitor's acting a flinch or a something. Do you know what I mean? Where she's sort of taking that on board, bearing in mind that at the time she probably wouldn't have thought of it in that way, but you've got to think back to the arc and the journey she's been on, particularly with that guy who was the records office man and then pretended that actually he was in charge. Do you know the episode I mean?
Yeah, the first season one.
Yeah.
Duet, I think it's called. Yeah.
And so she no longer sees in the stark black and white terms now that she did then. But I think one of the real points of this episode is that in those sorts of situations, everything is a shade of grey.
Yeah.
So whereas for me, Kira's is a lighter shade of grey, if that makes sense, it's still all shades of grey. But then it all gets horribly freaky, and like a proper horror film, and he threatens to cut the baby out of Kira.
Yep.
And then she starts saying, but the baby isn't innocent, the baby's human, it might not survive. And so she asks for a sedative, and he gives her one. She feigns sleep, kicks him in the bollocks, he falls over, and then she shoots him because the herbs she's been taking counteract sedatives.
Here's a question. Do you think she knew that was going to happen? Or was she just taking any desperate measures she could to try and eke herself out a bit longer?
I think we know from the conversation earlier on that sedatives don't work if she takes the herbs.
Right.
That's why she'd stopped taking the herbs, because she wanted to be able to sleep a little.
So you reckon she's using her knowledge of the herb? Yeah.
Yeah, so therefore, because she started taking them again, in other words, so she had no way of knowing that he would agree to give her a sedative.
Yeah.
But it is a deliberate ploy.
To enable her to act.
Yes.
Cool.
And then she's there at the end and she's in shock, and they're trying to sort of talk to her, and she's not up for talking. But she says, sometimes innocence is just an excuse for the guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, sometimes so-called innocence is an excuse for inaction. And she then says, you need darkness for the light to be visible, which is true. And I love the way it ends. It's not all, oh, phew, I'm happy now.
Yeah, well, quite, yes.
Do you know what I mean? She's in shock, which is right, and she's not triumphant.
Mm-hmm. Nor is she, I had to kill him, boo-hoo,
no.
But there's a sort of nice balance to it, really.
It is. And then it ends with an amazing shot of the Defiant from underneath.
Yes, well, this happened completely by accident. We've never seen the Defiant from this angle before, and the reason why they ended up with this shot is the rostrum that the camera was on, or the model was on, one of the two, was broken, so they could only shoot it from that angle. So we get that amazing shot, the Defiant, going across the camera effectively. You get to see the underside clearly for, I think, the first time, to be honest. So impressive stuff.
I like it.
For those who are fan of spaceships.
But also, I like it as well just because it's a bit different. And in the same way as you've been given a different view of the occupation, a different view of resistance and terrorism, you get a different view of the Defiance, even though it happened by accident. It's kind of fitting.
Okay. The story, interestingly, was written by Brian Fuller.
Oh, yeah?
Who was, of course, originally the guy who was going to be behind Discovery before they parted their ways for whatever reason. He based it on Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. And it's a very atmospheric story. As I say, it's a bit Seven in places, and Prynne particularly is quite amazingly creepy.
It's been ages since I've seen Seven.
Yes, I think I've only seen it once. I think that's probably enough. When you remember the ending, I'm not sure there's much virtue in seeing it again.
I can barely remember any of it. I think I saw it 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think you might have to give it another 10, I think.
Gosh, right. No, I'm going to add that to Drunken Horror Movies roster.
Oh, feel free. I don't take part in that. You should really do a podcast for that, although you're all... There's 3 of you, isn't there?
Yeah, and we're all smashed to fuck.
Off your faces watching horror films. Quite often I come in, because I'll be out for the night, and come in and they're all monging Haribo and several pints down, and
a lot of pints down usually,
and just and this has happened twice now. I'll go into the kitchen, because our kitchen, there's like a big hole in the wall between the kitchen and the living room, so which we got put in so we could keep an eye on the kids basically when they were young. And I'll go into the kitchen to get something, because the kitchen will be in darkness. I'll open the fridge and they'll all jump a mile.
Lauren screams.
Yes, every time. It's funny. Anyway, that's a bit off the track.
Sorry.
I think this is an excellent story.
Yes.
And as I say, very well shot as well.
No, it's very atmospheric. It's a really good... For me, it's the combination of the direction, the acting and the writing, and they all really come together.
They do.
And make it really stand out. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, what does Doreen think? I enjoyed this one with its mysterious elements, where everyone was trying to figure out who is killing the former members of Kira's resistance cell. As I don't remember watching this one before, when they figured out the recordings of 1, 2 and 3 were actually distortions of Kira's own voice, I really seriously wondered if she was some kind of sleeper agent, a bit like Talia Winters in Babylon 5. Ooh. It was a bit weird when Kira was talking about her becoming a member of the resistance cell, as it was a little like how someone might talk about achieving their Baden-Powell or Duke of Edinburgh award or something. But it was a story illustrating the horrible reality of growing up on Bajor during the occupation. When the horribly disfigured Cardassian was preparing to get his revenge on Kira without harming the innocent, it was a marvellously haunted performance of him not being quite in his right mind.
Yeah.
To say the least, yes.
Yeah. And we've heard from Purry!
Hello, Orgs. Purry here to talk about Between the Darkness and the Light. Title-wise, it's going all a wee bit Babylon 5, isn't it? I've expected to come out and say that they're grey, they stand between it, but no, this is quite an interesting one. Now, I might sound a little down on this. I'm not. I actually really enjoyed the episode. Very interesting one, giving Kira lots to do, as a lot of her old terrorist cell buddies are being bumped off one by one. And what I might add are interesting and diverse ways. Always nice when you get someone bumping off people one after the other, that they don't just rehash old material. Lots of concealed traps and that sort of thing. I thought it was creative. Definitely one that would stump Columbo a bit. But what we have here is Kira trying to investigate and trying to work out who's bumping them off and why before it gets to her. Now, one of the things I liked about this was it gave Nana Visitor a lot to do, and that's good. She got to show a lot of emotion, she got to be driven, and they also acknowledged the fact that she was still pregnant and that something got in the way, which I enjoyed. I also liked them bringing back those 2 characters from, I can't remember the episode, but they're 2 resistance buddies. And indeed, I was kind of upset that they died. Like I say, don't remember this one much, but I was quite sad when they went, and I think that helped. The fact that we'd met them before, and then they turn up again, you're like, oh, it's them from that episode, rather than just hear, the first few where this is so-and-so, oh, that was part of her cell, oh, this is so-and-so part of the cell as well. I think the fact that we had some background with these characters, even if it was only an episode, when they get killed, you kind of go, oh, I like them, which is good. It put a bit more impact into the episode. The crazy Cardassian at the end I thought was a little bit over the top, but I did like it, and I think this is maybe one of the things where I'd criticise the episode slightly, is now the guy at the end he was doing ironing. Basically he was a sort of cleaning bloke, and he got badly burned when they attacked a Cardassian base. And by response, Kira does say that while he never oppressed anyone, the fact that he was working with the Cardassians basically made him guilty. And indeed it is this thing of when does a legitimate target stop? I mean, my view is he probably wasn't, but he was on a base. He was in a military facility, so you could argue that he's definitely in some way complicit. I suppose you're in your old whether the plumbers on the Death Star, the people who are assembling Death Star 2, were innocent victims or people who knew what they were getting into. So I thought that was actually quite interesting. I wouldn't have minded seeing some more of this, maybe some more things about Kira saying that she wasn't always sure, or that there were some muddier targets that they hit, things that maybe weren't straight away up military bases, maybe even talking about it's not just someone she's annoyed, perhaps it's collateral damage. I think there could have been a bit more of that, but overall, decent stuff, good intrigue plot, and went along nicely, so can't really complain much. So I'll be back shortly to talk about the Begotten. Until then, bye for now.
Bye. Thank you, sir. Yes, it does get a bit Clerks when you start thinking about it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But you're right that Ferrell Lupus's death has impact.
We've heard from Drew and Tracy.
We just watched The Darkness and the Light. What do you reckon?
I really liked that.
Okay.
I did. It was a real suspensio-filled episodio.
Yep, I guess it was, yes.
Yep. I'm sure you're going to absolutely critique it now, aren't you?
No. Stuff I liked, the transport to death, or I didn't like the transport to death.
Really nasty,
it was grim, wasn't it? I'm surprised you don't see that more, though. Like, it'd be a good way to off someone, wouldn't it? Just like muck around with some of their molecules as they're transporting.
I think you've got to be very kind of devilishly brained to think of something like that. And why would you want to? That's messy. I don't understand how Worf and Dax didn't say, fuck me, that stinks to high heaven, this rotting, burning body.
Maybe.
Ugh. So Kira in her quarters, right, is taken to her quarters from the bridge by... It's not the bridge, is it? The control room. The control room. Anyway, so taken to her room by a security guard, and there's someone standing outside, and then she goes in, and he literally says to him, help yourself from the fridge, i.e. the replicator.
Yep.
And then hears a noise, and then gets out a gun, and then turns the fucking lights off, and goes in like combat mode to kill whoever's in there. We said at the time, two things. Why didn't she just do...
Call for security. Yeah.
Security to security.
Transport straight out. Military transport, yes.
She is heavily pregnant.
I know.
And she's just going in being all like militant, isn't she?
Perhaps you can put it down to her pregnancy. She's not been thinking straight. Same as... when she heard like the apartment had been blown up and she was racing there and it went all a bit airplane, like beating up all the security guards on the way there. It's just like, really? But you stop fighting your friends, your allies.
Exactly, but also you saying about putting it down to pregnancy hormones. I did think when she found out that woman, I can't remember what her name was now, had died, her being pregnant... Kira would have just been in floods of tears.
Maybe.
Instantly.
I think pregnancy and bajorans just makes you angry and fighty.
Oh, she's a bit of a roughhead, isn't she?
Also, when Odo said, she's deleted the list of suspects. She really deleted every copy of that list. He couldn't just get another list again.
This
is
advanced science. Even I can do some rubbish, kind of recovery from
the
recycle bin.
He should have looked in the recycle bin.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. Oh, she's deleted it. Oh, no, that's right. She's in the recycle bin.
Yeah,
there we go.
So have they said before that actually the baby's a boy?
I don't know. We both picked up on that.
Bashir,
I know they did say Sean, Swampy, maybe.
But then, okay, I'll let you have that one. But then, how did the Cardassian know that it was a boy?
There's super scanners, tricorders on there, not tricorders, tricorders on there, scanning it.
On what?
On the baby. They're like, oh yeah, it's got a penis, it's a boy.
Who?
The Cardassian.
Why?
Because you said, how do you know it's a boy?
He didn't have time to.
We don't know what happened.
Whatever. But just talking about him, the Cardassian with a conscience, i.e. is saying, I have to kill you because you killed a load of innocent Cardassians, and not all the Cardassians that were on Bajor for the occupation were bad. I was like a slave, whatever. And then, like, typically, he turns out to be a fucking nut.
Yeah, he did, yes.
For crying out loud. But yeah, was it Siloran?
I don't know.
Is that his name?
Maybe.
Alright. I liked this episode. It was gripping. I liked it.
I don't know. I
liked this episode more than fucking the last one where Ben was like worshipping some kind of totem pole.
We're not reviewing that one.
No, I know, but this was more grit.
The best I can say with this is meh, to be honest. There's an episode, I go that far. I can't really say much about it, really.
I think maybe it's in Kira's contract that she has to have a little bit of action, because she's really done nothing since she become like really heavily pregnant, and she's just kind of popped up in the background. And I think she's had to have one. She's had to have a good episode.
Well, if you think it's good, that's good. I'm not saying it's bad, I just felt meh. But I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. Alright, talk to you later.
Bye.
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 Yeah, they had to wait until Nana Visitor had actually had a baby before they could do any action Kira stuff, which is why she was stuck in ops for so long. I mean, at this point, she isn't actually pregnant. She's got a
pregnancy suit.
Yeah, she's got the...
And you can actually, as someone who's been pregnant, you can tell by the way some of the things are shot and the way the cloth is lying over her
You can tell
belly.
by the way I hold my bum. No, maybe let's not pursue that one.
No, you strange, strange man.
The Bee Gees song we should have had.
No. In terms of why didn't she transport out in the bedroom, I think the answer is because her friend had just died because of a transporter.
Yes, that would put you off using a transporter, wouldn't it?
However, it did occur to me when she suddenly went emergency transport to go and get the thing.
Yeah, then she was willing to do it.
She ought to have been a bit wary of doing that.
Maybe. The thing about Odo not keeping backups is a bit strange, although obviously he did Kira did shift delete. And when you do that, it doesn't go into the, waste paper basket, does it?
No, but haven't they got document recovery?
Obviously not. I mean, if anybody's going to know how to permanently delete something, it's going to be Kira, let's face it.
To be fair, yeah.
I think the whole thing about Worf and Dax not complaining about the stink, almost guaranteed they'll put some sort of stasis field on as soon as they realised she was, dead and there was nothing they could do about it, in order that then when Julian came across when they got to Deep Space Nine, they preserved it as much as possible. So I don't think they'd be suffering from stinky body. You may be relieved to hear.
I'm not sure, given the charred mess, how much was left to smell, because it's flesh that smells, and it looked
there'd be at least a burning smell, wouldn't there, which wouldn't be pleasant.
No, that's true, but in the same way as the transporter discharges weapons, would it not also automatically quarantine? So therefore there wouldn't be a smell, because that involves the escape of atmosphere.
Oh, I don't know.
And we've heard from the Llama God.
Yes, the newly married Llama God.
Yes, congratulations.
Yeah, to you both.
Llama God's log. Scotland, Shek Jake, Shak, Dikatsia. It is as the God said, we are grey, and we stand between the darkness and the light. But that was also another show, which we are not covering now. Yeah, okay, so I'm making some allusions to another science fiction show set on a space station where there was a major important character called Ducat. So, I'm sure these things are just coincidences. As long as this episode of Deep Space Nine doesn't do anything to make it look too similar to an episode of Babylon 5, I took the name, sorry, then we should be okay. But hey, look, it's director Mike Bajar, who had nothing to do with Babylon 5, apart from direct the most critically lauded episodes. Anyway, look another way. Don't look behind the curtain, don't look behind the curtain. On the plus side, he's a good director, and interestingly, story for this episode by one Ryan Fuller, so I'm assuming he left the writer's room before they could actually get the episode on the air or something. That's my attempt at Discovery-based snark. But okay, so this is an interesting episode, despite using a classic line from Babylon 5. We once again have a story that examines Kira's time in the Resistance. Sort of. The episode opens with a late 1960s fondue, which goes horribly wrong, and then moves on to Kira downloading the latest Slipknot album. So that's an intriguing start. But yeah, this episode has some good moments. The revelation that Worf has learned the rules of acquisition is a really nice moment, and maybe it's a sign that the writers are starting to deal with Worf better. I mean, he's definitely clever here. That's definitely the clever thing to do, is to learn about the alien races. It's also interesting to learn that the transporter has a well done setting. So I know that they had all that talk about the tech disrupting the pattern in the buffer, but, you know, basically, that's just crispy human. Tasty and sticky. Yeah, don't know what's going on there. And of course, it's also nice to see some of Kira's old friends from the Resistance again. But of course, when they show up and everyone's really happy to see each other, it's a clear sign that things are going to go badly wrong very, very soon. Although we do get a lovely scene of them, you know, trying to kill O'Brien, as you know happens to O'Brien. O'Brien sure knows how to choose the women that he hangs around with. So there we go. Explains, I guess, why he's so infatuated with Kira and her feet. But yeah, as the mystery of the story progresses, it's quite interesting. It's great to see Kira going after the killers, even though she's obviously not at her physical peak, but she stays true to herself. But there is a brilliant moment where Sisko declares that he's going after Kira, and the passion behind that just shows just how close they've become over the course of the series, and that's really great to see. I guess what's disappointing, though, is the actual reveal of the killer, and yeah, the scene's pretty frighteningly shot. It's very well directed, as I said at the beginning of this feedback. I'm expecting nothing less than Mike Bajar. I mean, it's definitely a very chilling scene with the prospect of Kira undergoing a fourth cesarean. I mean, that's just horrifying from whatever perspective you want to look at it. Ultimately, though, although this is a good, solid episode with a lot of really, really good performances and some really tense moments and some unintentional funny moments, ultimately it feels like a bit of a backward step to me. I mean, yeah, okay, so I liked the Rise episode a couple of weeks ago, but that's because that purported to be nothing more than a bit of silly fun. This set out to be a deep episode, and yeah, we get to learn some things about Kira's past, but at the same time, we don't really learn a lot about Kira's past. We basically learn that bad things happen in the Resistance, and during times of war, people can do bad things. So that's not really shedding a lot of light on things that we didn't know. This really feels like it should be a Season 1 or Season 2 story, where we learn that, you know, there's some dark stuff happened. We know that now. So yeah, I feel like at this point, even in Season 5 now, we should be learning more, something new about Kira, and we don't in this episode. We just learn that Kira is Kira. She's driven no matter what her physical circumstances, and she's always going to kick ass, and that's basically it. But we knew all that anyway, so yeah. But as I say, it's also an enjoyable thriller of an episode, and yeah, I enjoyed it while I was watching it, so yeah. Okay then, let's see what the next one is doing with us.
Well, thank you, sir. I kind of get where you're coming from in terms of it being Season 1 or 2 episode, and that it isn't part of the arc plot that we've had developing recently with the Dominion and the Klingons and everything. It's a very standalone episode, isn't it?
Hey, yes, in some ways. Beyond the fact that obviously it's within the continuity
of the pregnancy.
Of the pregnancy, yeah.
So I kind of get it in that sense, but it's incredibly well written and directed and acted, and I don't feel the episode actually is about Kira. She takes centre stage, but the episode is...
I think it is, actually. I think it's about her attitude to the occupation and how far she was willing to go, and how, you know, she's actually to an extent unrepentant on that, because as far as she's concerned, it was necessary. So it's kind of a window into her mind, really, which, you know, and she ends up being a strong... I mean, we already knew she was a strong character, but this kind of underlines just how the strength of her character, so I appreciate it for that.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is where, in the scene with Pharrell and Lupus, and she's saying, you know, Lupus is like, you know, we'll go and kill them, and she's like, no, that was then, this is now, we need to hand it over to the proper authorities. Then they say, you're not going to feel like that when you find out who it is. Which is you get to see, and it's true, when they're dead. So they obviously know her character, but at the same time, it's not that she isn't sorry for what she did, but the times have changed, and she has changed with them. Mm-hmm. But I felt that the episode more was about exploring the ethics of a situation where everything is grey.
Yep, it was that too. Cool, shall we move on to our next episode?
Okay.
It's the Begotten.
The enemy sent it.
Baby changeling.
The Federation wants it.
If it gets out of that container, it could be dangerous.
The future relies on it.
They want you to establish communication with the changeling as soon as possible.
Now, the secret of the galaxy's most elusive race
There must be some other way.
must be uncovered at whatever the cost.
Don't die.
On the next Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Well, that made it sound a lot more dramatic than it actually was, but there we go.
It sounded odd, though. They kept... The gloopy sound effect was in there when it didn't need to be.
Yeah, that was a bit random.
Yeah. Slightly, I found it distracting as a trailer, actually.
Odo has woken up in the morning and done his back in. The funny thing about this was just before we pressed play for this episode, Anne-Marie came in the room and said, I've done my back in. She had no way of knowing. It was just like a lovely bit of synchronicity there.
It was, yes.
Meanwhile, a Eurydian has sold a sick baby founder to Quark, who then sells it on to Odo.
But I love the way that Quark gets the scanner and without speaking, just gets his thumb and puts it on as a way of getting him to agree when... Sneaky.
So that's our teaser. They're using one of those light strip props from the Dyer's cast again, just the one this time, which kind of makes sense as it was used on Odo before, so it's obviously changeling-related technology. And thankfully, Sisko's uniform settles down in this one, so they finally got it right. Hurrah! Logically, he suggests Odo should contact Dr. Mora, which goes down particularly badly. If you remember from his previous experience with Mora, it wasn't good. Odo is left alone to talk to his goo baby.
Which just looks like that thing that you used to have, the blue one.
Oh, yes, it was like a lava lamp, but it wasn't a lamp. It was just goo in a jar, basically.
And it's just slowly dripped through. And that's all the time it was in the cylinder.
Yeah.
But even more so when it was blue, that's all I could think of. All it needed was one of those little spinny wheels.
And we get cloying panpipe music. Oh, just what we need. We get a very odd Bajoran birthing ritual. It's all about relaxing Kira so she can give birth, but Miles messes it up by sneezing. Plus, Shakar arrives late. Oh, good, our favourite. You'll be relieved to know this is his last appearance in the series. What a shame. Odo takes his goo babe to the replimat in a glass, which is probably risky. It might get drunk by somebody.
It's in a fucking pint glass.
I'm sorry, I drank your baby.
Episode title.
I drank your baby.
I'm sorry, I drank your baby.
Worf asks why he's talking to his drink, making Odo look a tad mad. Then Worf looks down to his own drink when he's told it's a changeling. It's a nice comedy moment. Again, give Dawn a single scene in an episode, he does well. There's more boring chatting to the goo, and then Dr. Mora turns up with his tartan top of amazingness. It's James Floyan again, last seen in the alternate in the second season. Odo doesn't want his help, and Mora agrees to stay only to observe Odo's technique.
Fanar.
Oh, really? Despite a day of getting nowhere, Kira's refusing to be induced, which seems a tad daft considering it could take weeks for the babe to arrive, and Shakar has to cancel stuff. I mean, he's only in charge of an entire planet after all, but there we go.
Yeah, but certainly if it's anything like what I had to go through, being induced isn't fun.
No.
So if you've got the possibility that it might happen naturally if you give it a little bit of time, you set a deadline and then say no induction, thanks.
And the midwife tells him to be on time tomorrow, and then tells Miles to practice on his gong, and Meanie gives a lovely hurt look. Mora is clearly bored with Odo talking to the changeling, and so am I, to be honest. Wow. We get a goo montage. Incredible. That's not quite your A-team standards, it has to be said. Mora accuses Odo of being a bad parent, which is nice. There's a big row, which Sisko turns up at the end of, which is good timing. He points out Starfleet is going to want to take over the project if Odo doesn't make progress.
Which is... I just find Starfleet's attitude to this is horrible. They should have learnt from Measure of a Man.
Yeah, they clearly haven't. That's his problem with these big monolithic organisations, you see. He says working for the church. Anyway... I've had one of those weeks, folks. Mora points out that this was the pressure that he was under from the Cardassians back in the day. So,
and again, that highlights how bad Starfleet's behaving.
Well, indeed,
if it's being compared to the Cardassians.
Odo caves in, and they use one of Pol's machines to try and force it to shapeshift, which makes some progress. And Odo's a sudden convert to electrotherapy, apparently. Shakar walks in on O'Brien massaging Kira's feet, and the chief won't let the First Minister take over.
And the thing is, though, his reaction to everything just totally reminds me of that scene from Pulp Fiction.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the feet are a very central part of a woman, yeah. Then when Kira announces that she's ready to give birth, there's an undignified fight. There's more heavy-handed parent stuff from Pol and Odo. They're about to leave the room and the baby turns into Mr. Hanky the Christmas Pooh. That's a highlight. Yeah.
See, I never saw it like that. It looked like a very large dildo at one point.
Oh, nice. There we go. My mind goes scatological and yours goes... Yes. Anyway, the scene where we're looking from behind the changeling at Odo and Pol looking at it, if you see what I mean, nearly didn't happen as they didn't have the money for the CGI for that. At the last minute, they used a hand in a sock covered in some of the goo to recreate it. Which,
wank sock.
Nice. Oh, really? Because the changeling is developing faster now than Odo did, Pol compliments his approach. And Odo admits he respected Mora, which is a bit of a sudden change, to give the episode a bit of nice feels all of a sudden. O'Brien and Shakar have another falling out at the birth and get banned from the room by Kira. That. Yes, I love the birth stuff. Is really good. It's rough on Miles as he missed Molly's birth due to the general disaster thing happening on the Enterprise at the time. Remember, Worf ended up copping for that. Actually, he's a wonder he's on the station at the moment. He'd say he wasn't going to be, didn't he? Then Shakar tells him not to involve his girlfriend next time he has a baby, which was, nice considering he had no choice about it whatsoever. Arseface.
He is an arseface.
Odo is celebrating in Quarks, and as ever, the best scene is between Odo and Quark.
Oh, I love drunk Odo.
You're in a good mood. Yes, I am. Which means you're probably about to arrest me on some trumped-up charge.
Not at all. I am buying you a drink.
Why?
Dr. Mora has gone to sleep, and I still feel like celebrating.
What are you up to?
I am happy, Quark. Can't you just accept that?
No, it doesn't fit. If you're happy, there's something very wrong in the world. The center cannot hold.
There we go.
I've got it. You're getting back at me for selling you that sick changeling.
Actually, I should thank you.
If you want the money back, just say so.
It changed my life. Here's to you, Quark.
All right, I confess. I don't know what I did, but I did it. Just stop. I can't take it anymore.
Why are you drinking? Because I'm happy.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof.
Which is a tune. Quark quotes Yeats' The Second Coming, the centre cannot hold, which is quite nice. But because Odo can't have more than a few moments' happiness, of course, the call comes in that there's a terminal problem with the baby thanks to the radiation that it suffered earlier before the story. Kira lets the boys back in for the final moments before Bab is popped finally. And you noticed that mysteriously the umbilical cord had been pre-cut.
Yes.
Which isn't that mysterious because obviously they're not using a completely newborn baby for this. Julian and Pol are unable to save the changeling, and Odo gets to spend the last few moments with it before the goo is absorbed into his body, and he's able to shape change again. In a nice touch, he leaves behind his uniform as he transforms into a Tarkalian Hawk, because of course, at the moment, his uniform is a physical thing. It's just after he turns back from being the Hawk that, of course, it's part of his changelingness, whatever you want to call it, part of his body, effectively.
Yeah.
We get a very syrupy final scene between Pol and Odo with an unlikely apology and hug. Ugh. Kira and Odo compare their feelings of loss, which is a piece of dialogue that Visitor asked for, because she said, she'd been looking after this baby for so long. Yeah. She'd feel, obviously a connection to it. It's going to be difficult for her, so that's fair enough and understandable. But yeah, this isn't a favourite episode of mine.
Whereas I really like it.
Uh-huh.
There's a whole load of things in there that I like and I pick up on. So, for example, the whole when Dr. Mora Pol says, spare the rod and spoil the child. It's particularly in America, actually, so many people who believe that. in this country, smacking is outlawed, but in America it isn't, and there's a very strong belief that, you know, you can if you smack the child, then you're disciplining the child right, and if you don't cause it any pain, it won't learn. And so for me, this is about opposing ideologies of parenting. And
although it would seem to come down ultimately on the smacking the child approach.
No,
they do electrocute the bugger to start making it develop.
No, they don't electrocute the bugger.
They do. That's exactly what they do.
No, there's a very mild electrical charge everywhere except in the middle, and the moment it can get to the middle, the pain goes.
Yeah, so they're electrocuting it so it moves away from the electric shock.
But it's about the idea of
cattle prodding it effectively.
But it's very mild. It's about the idea of proportionate discipline, because Odo is going from the making a connection talkative approach, but without discipline and without boundaries at all, which is also wrong. And the idea is that the true path is somewhere in the middle, and that actually they both recognise that, although they wouldn't necessarily end up parenting identically, they both recognise that they have each previously come from very extreme viewpoints that on their own are wrong. So Mora didn't try talking to Odo, and as Odo points out, he didn't actually know Odo was alive, whereas Odo is going in with an advantage. And the more that Odo is interacting with the baby changeling, the more he's coming to understand and therefore forgive his adoptive/surrogate parents' mistakes. In the same way as there's a lot of things that I held against my mum in particular for most of my adult life, and it was only really when our, shall we say, temperamental daughter was about 2 or 3, because she was at that age. I mean, she had her first tantrum at 6 months. She was a little bit of a handful. A lot of fun, but a little bit of a handful. And it was only when really I was dealing with that sort of thing that I then realised that, A, my mum was human, and there were going to be times when she was going to get things wrong because she'd had no bloody sleep, was exhausted and fed up, and also when young children scream, they're very loud, and it does your head in. And also I began to understand more of, even if I didn't agree with the decisions she made, why she made them. Even if I was consciously making a different choice, the choices she made were not done out of hate, but what she thought was right at the time. And that's what I see playing out with Odo and Mora Pole now that Odo himself is a parent. But the other thing I like is and I'm noticing, just with episodes in general, this more and more in this rewatch, is the parallels between the A and B plot.
Yes, they do. There's usually a connection. They're not completely randomly put together like I think Next Gen tended to do. If there was a B plot, quite often it'd be completely unrelated to the A one.
But so, for example, you get, at one point, all the fathers out the room. Shakar and Brian have been told to leave Kira, and also in the same moment in time, you've got Odo being told you need to leave us to it, while the changeling is dying. So you have all the fathers out the room at the same time. So you have got connections between the two plots, and that's not something, not just this episode but others as well, it's not something that I'd picked up until this rewatch.
Interesting.
Those connections. And the other thing that I want to not go on about but just mention, because again I don't think I'd noticed it before. You mentioned this is Shakar's last appearance. Well, when you've got the scene of them saying goodbye and they're calling and she says you've got to go, and then he says I've got a few more minutes, there's tension there. She doesn't want him.
You reckon?
I reckon that you know, yes, he turned up to be there.
I mean, what's more interesting, of course, is the fact that then Kira goes off with Odo for a long walk somewhere, and she puts her arm around him.
She does.
Yeah.
She does put her arm around him.
So that's quite nice.
Which is nice, but there's a connection between them.
Yeah.
But it isn't just that there's a connection between them. The body language, everything, even the hug that they exchange, there's distance between Kira and Shakar. From her, I'm not saying it's coming from his point of view. You can't tell he can't act.
No, and that might be part of the problem.
No, but from her, I think from her body language.
I'm not convinced, but anyway.
Well, I see it as, because he doesn't seem to understand her connection to the baby. if that makes sense. And that's it. It's a gulf that's too big.
Oh,
can't be crossed.
Well, they could have done something with that, but I didn't particularly
it would
feel
be
that
nice
they did.
if they'd explored it more, don't get me wrong, but this time round, that happened to be what I saw in her acting. I'm not saying I saw it in his. I don't think you can see anything in his.
There's not a great deal of acting to be seen, is there?
No, not with him, no.
Yeah.
No. I'm not sad he isn't coming back.
I don't know, whereas I found the O'Brien scenes amusing, at least, and they kind of got me through the episode. I was talking to Andy down the pub the other day, and he enjoyed the Odo scenes, but didn't enjoy the Miles ones, so kind of like we've got opposite approaches to this one.
Yeah, I didn't really like the Miles ones either.
Yeah. Whereas I just found the Odo ones interminable, but there we go. Let's find out what other people thought.
Yeah. How about Dory? What does she think? She says, I think I remember this one. Definitely remember the Kira giving birth bit and never liked those scenes. No, me neither.
Oh.
However, I didn't remember all the stuff about Odo and the baby changeling. I found it quite appropriate that I watched this on Sunday the 6th of August. Having celebrated the Feast of the Transfiguration at church in the morning, it felt quite appropriate to have Odo regain his transforming abilities, swooping around the promenade as an eagle or whatever bird it was. I think this gift might come with strings attached if my foggy rememberings of later storylines are correct. Ish?
Don't know, can't remember.
Think so. My memories are foggy as well. She says, I feel a little curtailed in commenting on it. I felt very close to Odo, but as I've never been a parent, Dr. Mora's perspective is much more difficult for me to understand. When Captain Sisko came in and passed on the demand for progress and the implicit threat of control being taken from Odo, it did help me a wee bit. Being a dyslexic and given little option but to learn left brain skills like reading, writing and organisation in order to get anywhere in life, I greatly sympathised with Odo, especially when he talked about being poked and prodded. Then when Odo realises he has to approach the teaching process at least some of Dr. Mora's way, the baby begins to learn, and faster than Odo did. Odo's crestfallenness makes me think of trying to compete with folk for whom primary school skills come easily and just not managing well enough. But I also feel like I can't find my dyslexic strengths as I've been trying so hard to fit into a left-brain world. Anyway, I guess I better shut up now, and I look forward to hearing the podcast.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
The Llama God has this to say.
Llama God's Log, supplemental. After the darkness of the previous story, we now face what is clearly a comedy episode. Because, of course, parenthood. It's a laugh, isn't it? Yeah. It starts off lightly enough as we discover that Worf and Odo have become prune-juice buddies. There is honour in being regular. There is. Let me get to my age. And then Quark turns up and gives Odo a slush puppy, and he's overjoyed by the slush puppy. Of course he is. I mean, they're slush puppies. Even in the 24th century, it's good to see that something persists. Slush puppies. They're great. I'm not just saying because it's hot. Actually, it's not. It's pissing it down up in Scotland today. But, yeah, anyway. But yeah, there's two threads to this episode, both themed around parenthood. The first and least interesting one, because it's about the O'Briens, and I think that's fair to say, obviously concerns the final delivery of the O'Brien's child, now that Nana Visitor has herself recovered from pregnancy, I guess, and she can stop wearing that false belly that she's been using for the last couple of weeks. And I didn't check the credits on this episode, as I did with the previous one, nothing jumped out at me clearly, but obviously this episode was written by a man who has actually never experienced childbirth, for obvious reasons, or has ever been present during an episode of childbirth, because only someone who has done neither of those things could write something about how hilarious it must be if women could just be calm and relaxed and considered during childbirth, and how men could be the one that lose it. Whatever. Still, there is some mirth to be gained from O'Brien and Shakar's rivalry during the episode, as they both jockey for the position of getting to see Kira's cunt. I guess there is at least, some parallel there between use of the name Shakar. But that's going back to my last bit of feedback. Ridiculous as the notion is, though, that Bajoran women have to be calm to give birth, this really does beg the question: how did the Bajoran race actually survive the Cardassian occupation? And from what we've learned in the previous episode, at least, that was far from a calm time. So, yeah, shouldn't they be extinct or something? Doesn't necessarily follow. And of course, there's also the follow-up question: is Kira going to breastfeed? Because, well, could be depressing. Keiko's not going to be, so are we going to get to see Kira with damp patches for the next few episodes on her uniform? Well, I don't know. I honestly don't know where my mind's going. I've been inside it. The other thing is a bit more satisfying, though, with Odo becoming parent to a jar of marmalade, which she spreads onto a petri dish and tells it that it can be anything it wants to be. It can turn itself into anything it thinks it can never be. Be free with the... Oh yeah, I don't know what's wrong with that. And also the return of Dr. Maura Pole, and I think this is the most satisfying part of the episode, where Odo doesn't necessarily make up with Dr. Maura, but he at least comes to an understanding, as he understands that parenthood isn't actually always just fun. But it's great to see them sort of working through the same problems and coming to an understanding. Yeah, it's a great advancement of Odo's character, actually, where he actually comes from. He's a changeling, but that's not where he came from. He was born in different circumstances, and now he's coming to terms with it, so this is something that's hopefully going to affect him as a character going forwards. And of course it kind of ends in tragedy, although as with every great film, and I'm talking about Star Wars Episode 3 and Alien 3 here, okay, I might have a slightly odd definition of great film, but as with all of those films, we have a juxtaposition of new life being brought into the world, whilst other life passes away. But obviously it's not a passing away of life, because Odo finally gets his abilities back. I don't know why, but I have this memory that this went on for a bit longer, maybe because I actually experienced the actual gap between season 4 and 5, and then however many weeks. Actually, it's the same number of weeks with this rewatch, so I don't know what's going on there. I was younger. It felt longer, and I thought Odo was going to stay a solid commercial for a lot longer than this. But it was also inevitable that he was going to get his powers back again. But at least we get to see the sweet story with him and Maura Pole, and also we get to see him turn into a Tarkalian, whatchamacallit, as he's been talking about for ages. So yeah, that was really lovely. And as a bonus, when Odo gets his powers back, he also shapeshifts and leaves his clothes behind, so someone has been paying attention. Still doesn't explain the whole issue with the communicator, but, at least they're paying attention to something. So this was actually a lovely and sweet episode, mostly because of the way it focused on Odo, the O'Brien stuff, and Odo's story, I loved it. Alright, it's back on track here. Now, let's see what the ramifications of this are going forward, whether Odo has residual guilt and whether Kira has child loss issues. Yeah, probably not. Because, there's also this war thing going on. If anyone remember there's a war, I guess we'll find out next week. So yeah, I'm now up to date with your podcasts, and I'm enjoying them, so thanks very much for those. Glory to you and your casts.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. In terms of the breastfeeding thing, first of all, we don't know how Bajorans breastfeed, what it is they produce.
I mean, the whole childbirth thing is clearly very different because she ain't in any pain whatsoever, so it's not the same as human childbirth, so slightly unfair to say, oh, well, why should they have comedy now? Well, apparently they can do comedy because Bajoran childbirth's clearly a lot more relaxed and chilled than human childbirth.
So presumably, in addition to everything else happening, the pelvis widens and therefore the baby has a bigger...
Heaven knows, but obviously their plumbing's slightly better than ours.
But in terms of the breastfeeding, what we can already do with current medical technology is give a woman hormones to stimulate breastfeeding, because some women who to stimulate the milk production, some women who adopt babies take them in order that they can breastfeed the baby they've adopted.
Well, wasn't there a thing called a wet nurse back in the day?
Yeah, but that was
royalty.
Yes, but that was usually somebody who was already breastfeeding their own
children.
See,
so they're already... Okay, fair enough.
Whereas this is artificial hormones to stimulate milk production, which, as I said, we've already got now. So this is however many years in the future. So if she wants to, Keiko can breastfeed her own baby.
And likewise, presumably there's something that Bashir can give Kira in order to avoid the damp patches. So.
If indeed Bajorans have them.
Yes.
I would have thought so. What's a little more complicated is the issue you raise of if Bajorans need to be relaxed to give birth, how on earth did that happen under the occupation? The only answer I have for that is that the line that the nurse gives, which is... you can always have Bashir cut the baby out of you, and then she says, no, I want the traditional method. Maybe part of the reason Kira is so adamant she wants the traditional method is because...
it wasn't possible during the occupation, and they were having to have
cesareans.
Yeah, there's a thought. Gosh, another reason why they're being bittered, yes.
And then, yes, you raise the issue of the communicator.
Yes, that is
I don't think there's an answer.
No.
It would be nice if there was one, but
No,
I honestly don't think there is.
That, no.
No, I don't think there will be.
Well, I certainly wouldn't put it down as a comedy episode. I think they're trying it to make it an issue episode about fatherhood or parenthood. And,
I think there's supposed to be comedy with O'Brien and Shakar.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the light relief, but the Odo stuff isn't supposed to be comedy.
I just want to slap Shakar in the face with a wet fish and have him fuck off.
Yeah, I must admit, this is his least amazing appearance, and I'm glad we're shot of him now.
Yeah, for me it isn't funny. I just want him gone. He's a cunt. The other thing is that, as you pointed out, Nana Visitor wanted those lines about the feeling of loss, and I raised it earlier in a cast about surrogacy. One of our it's not much to address the issue of the loss a surrogate feels, but it's there. It's at least acknowledged.
Yeah.
What did Drew and Tracy think?
Is there feedback for Deep Space Nine: The Begotten?
Ew, Albanian spine mites. That sounds rank.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good, did it?
So he goes to the doctor with like some right shitty ailment, and he's told, no, actually, you're just a bit stiff. That did make me laugh. Baby changeling.
Yes, I know.
That was really cute. But how does Odo know that it's a baby?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he seemed to recognise it immediately. I guess it's something from Misa changing. He knows it. Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, Rene, whatever his name is, acting is excellent, isn't it? How does he make you feel so much for just some like jelly, especially near the end, like the whole lot of it, and then you think the thing's going to die, and it was just really so sad. And I think it's purely the acting, isn't it? He's just been so good, like nurturing it and caring for it, like really pulling out your emotions for what is essentially just a glass of jelly, isn't it?
But I think it's weird because you never think, well, I never thought before of like a changeling kind of being a baby and then growing into adulthood.
No.
I always thought that it kind of was just a form, and like Odo had kind of transformed or changed into like an adult. I don't know. I never thought about it growing
Dr.
up.
Mora was in it before, if you remember,
Well,
and they did a little bit talk about how he kind of nurtured Odo. So it's a bit of a follow-up episode.
Oh yeah, I get that now, but I hadn't got that before. But then the baby, for me, at the beginning, looked like a glass of fat.
Yes.
It looked like a glass of crisp and dry that had
It
been
did,
left
yes.
for a day or two. And then it turned into a glass of beer, which Worf agreed with me because he said, why are you talking to a beverage?
In like a little
He
jug
did it
thing,
like
didn't
a
it?
tankard, didn't he?
Tankard, yeah.
Yeah. See, Odo and his teacher, what was his name again?
Dr.
Dr.
Mora.
Mora. That was a typical parent-teenager relationship.
Mm-hmm.
This was, the teenager, i.e. Odo, was like, I'm not going to treat you how I was treated because I'm going to give you better. And then actually, when they're going through it, he realises that Dr. Mora did his best for him, and had he not treated him the way he treated, he wouldn't be in a position to nurture his little babies.
I guess so, but I think they were coming from both sides to a middle point, because Dr. Mora was saying about how great Odo had done. So I guess Odo was building on the foundation that Dr. Mora had made and improving it to make the changeling have a connection with him, wasn't it?
But Odo needed to have those kind of nurturing skills from Dr. Mora, so he has to take some credit for it.
Definitely. But I'm saying that neither of them had the complete correct idea, but perhaps combined they both were somewhere in the middle.
So Bajoran birth.
Yes.
What the fuck is that about? I'm sorry. I don't give a shit where she comes from. Kira has got a Mary.
Yeah.
That baby's coming out of that Mary, right?
Yeah.
That's going to fucking hurt, right?
Well, it didn't seem to be, did it? No,
Well, exactly.
It was all
This is
about
what's not right.
relaxing
There was
in
no
Bajoran women.
sweat. There was no screaming.
It's a different
there
alien
was
race.
The baby came out with a little raspberry jelly on it.
It's a different alien race. So that's
Any
what
woman
they
watching
do.
this will want to fucking be a Bajoran.
Yes, I guess
There is absolutely no stress of it. Oh,
No.
I'm ready. Yeah, alright, Kira, whatever.
It was good, the parallels between like Kira having the baby and the baby changing, wasn't it? It's like Star Trek often does this, does it? A and the B stories, but they're kind of parallels
But
with
it
each other.
kind
It's
of
good.
drew Kira and Odo closer together because it kind of
Oh, yeah,
leads
at the
into
end,
how like
yes,
they,
definitely,
they
yeah.
kind of form their relationship. But yeah, it was cute.
Yeah.
It was too sad with Odo. A little bit
It was,
bittersweet.
yes.
You know, he gets
Well,
his changeling ability back.
yes.
But at the cost of his little bubba dying.
Yeah,
and
I
it
know.
was just a bit sad.
Bittersweet, yeah, definitely.
I did do a big pet lip at
I
the
know.
end.
I can remember this episode very clearly, as I knew it was coming, but it's still got an emotional punch, I think, on a rewatch for myself.
I liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed this episode, actually. It was good. Emotional stuff. Good acting, great stuff.
And he turned into a Targaryen hawk at the end?
Well, I assume that's what it was, yes, because he's just been talking about it,
Nice. Alright, well, we'll leave it there.
Yep.
Coolio. See you later. Bye.
Bye. In terms of how does Odo know it's a baby, because of its mass in its gelatinous state, he as an adult fits into an entire bucket.
Yes. So.
This is in a jar. And they do talk about it increasing its mass and its volume as its abilities develop. You're right, Renee's acting in this is amazing.
It is very good. It was the performance he was most proud of in the series, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, all he's got to work with most of the time is just his eyes, because Odo smiles so rarely. He doesn't even have his mouth to work with a lot of the time.
Although he does do a bit more smiling.
He does. And the fact he doesn't normally makes it stand out. But there's an awful lot of pain and shock and hurt in his eyes in his interactions with Maura Pole. And yes, you can see this does draw Odo and Kira closer. And at the same time, there is that wedge between Shakar and Kira.
Yeah. Okay. And Puri.
Hello again, Puri here to talk about The Begotten. I do remember this one, vaguely. Again, these were ones that I kind of saw many, many years ago, but I was really impressed with this one. Okay, we had a few weird things. I suppose my taste may vary. At least I've never had to give birth. But I can't see my wife enjoying the Bajoran idea of relaxing you during birth. I do remember her... she did swear at a midwife who offered her a singular aspirin for pain relief. And apparently gave some very dirty looks when a hot bath or... one of those Manuka ball, big inflatable ball things was suggested as a way to help her ease pain. Suffice to say, my wife went, onto the full gamut of drugs. But enough of that. I don't think she would have been happy if I was sitting in the room banging a gong. But that's really kind of a subplot. To be honest, it's a wee bit out of place. I don't think it was needed to have the little sort of subplot of O'Brien and Shakar kind of getting a bit overprotective over Kira and sort of almost competing for her. I didn't think it was really necessary. It didn't add much. And all it does is, again, show off how dull Shakar is. Oh, I was bored when he was on screen. But we did have a fantastic A-plot. And it does feed into this one, which is quite good. We've had Kira's baby born, which is good. It's, technically O'Brien's baby born, but it's good we've actually had that move through. But the plot where Odo buys a injured changeling, or a young changeling, and he's trying to raise it, and indeed it's really interesting the way Odo's character develops and the way it's portrayed. Maura Pole obviously shows up to help, but Odo's kind of resentful because his vision of his childhood was being poked, prodded, put into... And some of it sounds horrible because he was treated, in the early years of his life, he was treated like a substance rather than a person, so he was put through all sorts of centrifuges and that sort of thing, and he's understandably resentful, but as they start getting results and getting the thing to move around, you do get this absolute sense of joy. Really well played by Renée Auberjonois, and indeed... The way the episode ends, I think, is good, where it's dying, and he has that sort of shock of, no, we can't save it, and then it sort of absorbs into him and gives him his shape-shifting abilities back, which does sort of make sense. I know when I first saw it, I didn't think it did, but we had that episode where... he still formed, where we had that horrible technobabble explanation of forming a link, and so there's obviously still something shape-shifty about him, if you pardon the phrase, and this reawoke it, so I quite liked that, and I liked the whole idea of him, it was much more about him bonding with Dr. Paul, or Dr. Maura, I'm getting my Bajoran names wrong, and the way that they're kind of sorting out their relationship, which I thought was quite sweet and very well done. As I say, Renée Auberjonois plays, and he really runs through a kind of gauntlet of emotions. You get his absolute sort of being crushed, his joy of the thing sort of growing up, and then being crushed when his baby effectively dies, and then his again sort of joy and surprise at being able to shapeshift when he turns into the hawk thing and flies around the station. As a nice touch, something I'd not noticed before, his uniform falls to the ground because, of course, his uniform was normally him. And then Garrick had to make him one, so of course when he shapeshifts for the first time the uniform drops, which I thought was a nice touch. And indeed at the end, him and Kira both having this thought of losing a baby. I'm glad they addressed it. I had fears that it was going to... I don't remember how that went down, so I was quite glad that Kira was feeling a bit... she was having some feelings of not having a baby because she's gone through the pregnancy, and indeed it's nice that they went through that idea of how that affected her mentally. So even though I don't think we see much of it here on in, it was nice it was acknowledged. So overall, 2 very decent episodes, really giving this cast something to get their teeth into. So all that remains for me to say is do keep up the good work. I always look forward to the podcast, and I'll hopefully feed back the next time. Until then, bye for now.
Bye.
Bye. In terms of the labour and not being any pain, different biology, so different processes, but also, A, how do we know she hasn't been given some kind of traditional pain-relieving herb thing?
Yes, you might be off a gourd on something quite strong.
You don't know. It's not mentioned either way. So, she could be on Valium or something if she's got to be all relaxed. You don't know. Clearly the biology is different.
Well, clearly everybody else enjoyed this a lot more than I did. I just found it mostly tedious, but there we go. Hey-ho, I'm in the minority. Not for the first time. Alrighty. Well, I think we've got rather more excitement for our next story. Thank you to everybody who fed back this time.
Thank you!
Next time for bOrgCast 10.7.
Yeah.
We're recording on Thursday the 24th of August, and we'll be covering For the Uniform.
Yay!
Yes. And In Purgatory Shadow, which is the first part of a 2-part story. Unfortunately, it's the way it's fallen. We're not covering them both at the same time. But yes, both of them very interesting and exciting stories, so I'm looking forward to those.
I wonder if In Purgatory Shadow is the one I think it is.
Well, it would be very spoilery to suggest things, I suggest. So keep
okay. Quick question, because I don't think it's spoilery.
Uh-huh.
Is Garak in Purgatory Shadow?
He is.
I think it is that one then.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't a spoilery question.
No, because he's in several stories this season.
I think that's the one yes.
Good. Okay, we shall catch you next time, folks. Cheery bye.
Bye.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy.
The bOrgCast is brought to you by the lovely people at GeekPlanetOnline.com.
All music referenced is for illustrative purposes only, and no copyright infringement is intended. The music at the beginning of this podcast was produced by the 86th Floor on YouTube and is used with their kind permission.
To contact us, you can use the forums at GeekPlanetOnline.com.
Visit our Tumblr site at bOrgCast.tumblr.com, where you'll find images accompanying the episodes discussed in this cast.
Send email messages or MP3s to BORGCast@GeekPlanetOnline.com.
Or you can contact us via Twitter on rev_org or bOrgCastAmmo. #bOrgCast.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too.
Shut it down!